It's hard to argue against the fact that we're entering a really active weather setup over the next couple of weeks. I count 5 systems. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even arguably 6 systems that could impact the central and eastern U.S. over the next couple of weeks. We're going to dig into those details. Plus, we're going to talk about the winter impacts. The exact track of them, many are still up in the air, but things are starting to align over the next couple of days. And looking at some of the ensemble guidance, which uses a variety of members. These are the 51 different members, and if you take that out and you sort of put the average or the mean here, this gives you an idea of where you're going to see more than 3 inches of snow, or at least the chances of seeing it. Clearly across the Northeast as we head through next Tuesday, but look, chances are growing toward the middle part of next week, a little bit further to the south. And even more impressive on top of this, these are the odds of seeing more than 6 inches of snow. This yellow here is more than 50%, more than a 50% chance. And if you really zoom into places like New York, you're still looking at a 70 to 80% chance. Now, some of this may be two storm totals. Nonetheless, the chance of seeing some snow certainly on the table. Warm temperatures, though, above average as we head through Wednesday, Thursday, also into Friday, especially across the south. But then we start to see some colder air moving in. On the northern fringe of any storm, that's where we're going to see some snow, some ice this week, and some of that could be quite impactful. And as every storm moves to the east, we're going to see colder and colder temperatures. I was talking about that some yesterday. That's kind of the idea here behind these storms, as this boundary of warm and cold air sets up. Along it, we're going to see the storms develop. As we see this upper level pattern definitely start to shift up over the next couple of days, and we get a huge blocking pattern up across the North Pole. That's going to really cause some cold weather, I think, heading into next week. Here's a look at your snow totals on the European deterministic. Again, I don't take this. I like the ensembles better, but through the weekend, this is looking pretty good. And look at this, a new heavy stripe of snow trying to show up here from Minnesota east into the Great Lakes. And then next week, again, all things are really up in the air as we head into next week. When you look at some of this guidance, you take today's run and compare it to yesterday's, it looked a little bit different. And I imagine these will continue to shift around. Just for some comparison, the GFS also has these multiple storms. Here's a look at the European. We're going to start with where we are today on this Tuesday, taking you through the afternoon. We'll see some rain showers across the deep south, some snow and rain across the west. This is going to be heavy, and this sets the stage for a couple of things. First, this is going to move east later in the week, and we've also got this piece of energy that's going to start to bring some rain across the Tennessee Valley and some ice further to the north across Iowa into Illinois. Now, this is the European. It's a little more aggressive with the ice further north. It's been that way. I think it's one of the reasons you don't see winter storm watches up, at least as of the time of the recording of this video, early on Tuesday morning. That may change. The GFS also on board with the idea of some heavy ice on the northern side of this system into Ohio, Michigan, with heavier snow across the northern fringe of this system as it moves off to the east, and then some ice into Pennsylvania, where there are winter storm watches in effect. Could start with some snow into New York, and then things transition over to rain. This is a closer look at the future radar. This is the NAM. It's getting a little bit more fine-tuned, and I would argue that it's probably the most south as far as the features go. Look how far it suppresses the moisture here into Indiana and Illinois. It doesn't really push it into southern Michigan. It keeps most of the heavy ice here into central and northern parts of Ohio and Indiana, and then into Pennsylvania too. Maybe some ice too on the east side of the mountains, with snow into New York City to start, up to Albany, even back towards Binghamton, and then we eventually change over to some ice here across western New York, and then back over to New York City too, and then eventually over to rain as temperatures warm up. Even southern Connecticut, potentially going back over to rain, but once you get inland, more ice here, and then snow for interior areas with some showers draped to the south as our front drops in from the north. This is a quick look at the HRRR, which is also a short-range model. It's at the extent of its timeline here, picking up some of that ice across Iowa, northern Illinois. However, I would say, notice how much further to the north I think the HRRR is. This is the very end of its run, early Tuesday morning. More to come on this. I'm going to be updating this. If you're new to the channel, thanks for coming by. I'm Travis. I used to be a meteorologist many, many years ago on television. I got out of that, but I find myself looking at this kind of stuff over and over. So I hope you'll subscribe and come back. I'm going to be doing updates likely twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening as new data comes in, and we fine-tune these multiple storms. This is the NAM. Again, way far to the south. It may be a little bit arguably too far to the south. The European is still pretty heavy, a little bit further to the north. Still some fine-tuning to go on this, as the National Weather Service, again, at the time of this recording, no winter storm watches up outside of parts of Pennsylvania down into western Maryland, and it looks like the far northern counties of West Virginia, the confidence certainly higher here for that ice. But some of it could creep over to Philadelphia, maybe northern Delaware into western Maryland, and close to D.C., at least on the European. Snowfall amounts, quickly looking at that, this is the GFS operational run, keeping that snow further north, a couple of inches here from central Wisconsin up to Green Bay, and then the UP of Michigan, northern parts of Minnesota into New York, and then east into Vermont, New Hampshire, even Connecticut, and down to New York City. Maybe an inch or so possible, a couple of inches maybe even. It doesn't look like a super heavy snow here into New York. To me, it looks like a 1 to 3 inch snow. An isolated 4 or 5 inches possible, especially the further north you go into Vermont and New Hampshire. And then on top of this, if I run this out, look at the glacier that's being built across the Northeast on the latest GFS. Oh boy. All right. We'll pretend we didn't see that. But again, multiple chances for storms. I'm going to back this up. There goes the ice storm that we're seeing through Thursday. On the heels of this, interestingly enough, an almost identical storm. I don't know the last time I've seen something set up quite like this. It's almost too close. It's a little bit further to the north on today's run. That puts the ice squarely into parts of Michigan, hits Pennsylvania again, into southern New York with more ice here. New York City may start as some snow, sleet, freezing rain over to rain, and into the Northeast too, and into Maine. Snow here into the Northeast. That moves out, and then rain showers across the south. And this time, the cold air pushes a lot further to the south. That changes where our storm path will be for the next one. This will be number 3 on the way now. It'll form across the plains, which we'll look at in just a second, and then it's going to move east, likely along our cold air boundary. Where will low pressure be? How strong will it amplify? I think it all depends on how strong the upper level energy that swings in from the northwest is. It's still a little too early for that. We've got to get through 2 more storms before this one. So fine-tuning how this is going to impact areas of the mid-Atlantic, even into parts of the southeast. Do we get some ice into North Carolina? I don't know at this point, but I mean, this could be the kind of storm that brings some heavy snow into western Maryland, possibly Ohio and Pennsylvania, and maybe the Northeast. A long way to go before we get there. And then look, another one behind that late next week. I'm not going to get into any of these details, but you've got just the pattern is set up right now, guys. It's just really active. It's an incredible time to be tracking these storms if you're a winter forecast lover. If you don't like the snow, you may not like the forecast. Now, clearly, not all of you are seeing the snow. Too warm for anything across the south right now with this setup. Some rain moving through Thursday, and then into Friday, we start to see some snow back across Montana into Nebraska. So very light snow, though. Heavier snow up into South Dakota, into Minnesota. So it looks like Minneapolis, St. Paul, over to Green Bay, more snow. Maybe even Milwaukee. We might get some snow out of this one heading into Saturday with some ice possible further south towards Chicago, over to South Bend. And then in southern Michigan, too. Ann Arbor, we could see some snow over to ice. Further north of that, up into, say, Cadillac, you get up towards northern parts of Michigan, Traverse City. It looks like it's going to be all snow here, but we're looking at rain here. South of Indianapolis, into Indianapolis rather, and then into Kentucky. Cold air starting to build into the central plains as high pressure settles into this region. Now we're looking at moisture picking up across Texas. Do we get enough cold air in place for snow? And it doesn't look like a huge amplified storm. That's the problem, right? You've got to get a big trough swinging in with surface low pressure deepening for a strong storm. I don't see that just yet. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen, but you're definitely seeing some precipitation, some snow breaking out here heading into Monday and Tuesday, and then that moves east, and we've looked at that. High pressure builds in behind it, cold weather. As this high goes to the east, though, interestingly enough, you're likely going to get some southerly flow. That's going to bring your temperatures back up, but another piece of energy drops out of the Rockies, developing low pressure and moving it a little bit further to the north. So more snow, maybe, into the Great Lakes, and maybe another one behind that. Okay. All right, here's a quick look at the snow totals through the next day or two. The heaviest snow, at least the chances for snow, will be across the northern tier. And then as we head into Saturday, look at this. This drops further to the south. Now, keep in mind, some of these totals, you're seeing more than a foot of snow. There's already a couple of inches here in some of these areas. So we're adding another 10 inches or so, and maybe into eastern South Dakota, over into Wisconsin, and also Minnesota. And then we get into next week. So let's see how that pans out. Across the west, heavy snow here, across the Sierra into the Cascades. Up in British Columbia, a bit of a break. Your storm track really kind of down here into not Southern California, really across the Sierra, so much further to the south, I should say. And then once this moves through, we get a little bit quieter for the weekend with temperatures still cold, but kind of dry here. High pressure builds in. I got to worry about offshore flow at this point. To be fair, that could increase that fire danger across California. Fortunately, though, there is some precipitation. It looks like on the way, maybe even after that. Still pretty far out. We'll fine-tune that at a later date. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.